Standard of evidence. Now, here's the other thing. You assume in such an accusation, if it goes to court, depends on the court level, the level of court, that there's a strong burden of proof, or that the burden of proof will save you when you know you're innocent, right? Because you know that person's not credible. You know it's a ridiculous story that they're telling. It's not believable. It's not possible. You have evidence of some sort. Well, all of that might be true, but the standard of evidence in a civil environment or a tribunal environment is very low, and it's called a preponderance of evidence. And basically the judge or the panel overseeing this hearing only need to determine if the claim was more likely than not to have happened, to be true. And it's a very low standard considering all of the outcomes aside from the criminal outcomes. All the other outcomes are still extremely severe. It's still a very low threshold. And then, of course, the criminal proof beyond a reasonable doubt, that's what they tell us the threshold is. The proof beyond a reasonable doubt is open for debate. What does that mean, right? Proof. Where's the proof? You should have to prove that the crime occurred. And then reasonable doubt. What's reasonable? So reasonable, I think a good definition of reasonable is the likeliness of it to have occurred given the circumstances. And you have to be really high on that likeliness. The circumstances have to be undeniably pointing in the direction that it occurred for it to be determined to be reasonable. Possible or likely is too low of a standard. That's supposed to only apply in the lower courts. However, a lot of judges in criminal cases will use that standard. They still use that standard. They determine that it's possible it occurred given the circumstances. That's not the same as likely to have occurred. But those are subjective, depending on who's adjudicating. So, in the likely to have occurred given the circumstances, you need evidence that backs up those circumstances to be true. So if you're in a situation where you've been accused in a criminal situation, you want to make sure that you have evidence that proves the circumstances where it likely wouldn't have occurred. That's your only hope, pretty much. Your only hope is to prove that you didn't do it. So even though we have the presumption of innocence, that's the most sacred, fundamental principles of the criminal justice system is the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. The onus has already been reversed for you to prove your innocence. The feminists have worked very, very hard over the last 30 years to ensure that, to make sure that that happens. And it is happening, and it keeps getting a lot more difficult. My goal mostly is to educate people and to be an accessible resource for people online, to explain how the system works, or to kind of help people understand what to expect, and why things don't turn out the way they do, and to also spark public conversation. Ultimately, I want people to question their preconceived notions. For example, if somebody that they know has been accused, prosecuted, convicted, did time for a sex crime claim, the automatic assumption is, well, none of that would have happened if it didn't happen, if there wasn't evidence that it happened. I was one of those people that believed that until I met somebody who was one of those people, had gone through the entire system, and I watched him go through the system. I suppose I should just clarify, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a law student. I have no desire to be a lawyer or a law student. Why would I want that kind of debt? I don't know who does, but anyway. So I don't have any legal background, but I'm a researcher by accident, an accidental legal researcher, mostly criminal law focused in Canada particularly, because of having my eyes opened and, just having my own preconceived notions just completely blown out of the water and rearranged. So basically I'm trying to help contribute to calming down the moral panic, where everyone's believing that not enough sex crimes are reported, everything's going underreported, therefore we need to tighten laws and change things and make it easier for victims of sex crimes to report to police and have their day in court. There was a time where I thought that, I didn't think much of it. I myself have never been a victim of such a crime, but I have grown up. Before I met this person in my adult life, I did grow up with false accusations in the family. Hey there, do you find this content valuable, informative, and thought-provoking? If you do, there are links in the description bar for multiple ways to support my work. Donations help to sustain the production of content that informs and inspires viewers like you. Support what you value by contributing one-time or monthly recurring. Buy merchandise to take a stand and start a new conversation. And last but not least, subscribe to this channel, like, comment, and share to help this channel grow. I was not the person who made the false accusation, but I was sort of the reason why the false accusation was made. It was a custody battle, and, this happened when I was a child. The custody battle was over me, but it wasn't between my parents. So it was other family members who were, taking care of me. And so it just completely permanently changed the fabric of the family from that point on, even though, some attempts were made to keep the family in contact and on good terms. It still causes permanent damage. So the person who made those accusations, they meet a lot, if not all, of the criteria that I see in other, dare I say it, delusional, crazy, just people who want to play the victim. That type of mentality. It's, I don't know where it comes from. I don't know how it gets ingrained. If narcissism is a genetic trait or what, or if it's passed down through, I don't know. I don't understand it. But I did get to witness it, and I got to witness the pain that it caused the target of those accusations. And it's devastating. It makes everything really awkward for the whole family, and it never goes away over the years as that family ages and goes their different ways and whatever. It's pretty bad. So luckily it never resulted in any criminal charges or anything like that. However, because that's such a common tactic used by people in custody battles, divorces, ways to get back at somebody who's not giving them what they want, they feel that they're entitled to watch that person suffer for whatever reason. The courts over the last 20, 30 years have made it much easier for these women, and men do the same thing, to succeed in getting their revenge in court, getting their therapy in the courts. Yeah, no one can fully understand mentally unstable people's actions. I know. See, that's the thing. If you spend too much time, here's another thing. If you're falsely accused, and if you try and spend too much time trying to figure out why you're being falsely accused, why that person that you care about or did care about at one time, or didn't know, never have met, and you can't understand why they would do this, Don't try to. Save yourself the trouble. Don't try to understand it, because that's part of, you will be baited while you're being questioned by police or prosecutors or even your defense lawyer. You can be baited, and it can turn out badly. It can end up not working out for you. But they'll ask you, well, why would she make such an accusation against you? And you'll start coming up with, well, I don't know, it could be because of this, could be because of that. It could be this, honestly, I'm not 100% sure, but it's probably because of this, right? So as soon as you throw out some theories and hypotheses, they're going to latch onto that, and then they're going to disprove that or discredit it. And usually what happens is they do that by discrediting you. And you have to keep in mind, when you're involved in a criminal investigation or a criminal accusation, that the police are not looking to exonerate you. They're looking at what makes you look guilty. So if you tell them you have, witnesses that can vouch for your innocence or vouch for their craziness and their delusions, or prove that something they said is just completely wrong, the police might tell you something along the lines of, well, those are your character witnesses. They're not really going to help you with this investigation. You can have them in court. You can subpoena them at court. Well, okay, but you don't want this to go to court. You need the charges dropped. That's okay. So what to expect when you're being falsely accused? If it's a criminal accusation, you can expect that everyone involved wants it to go to trial. All right? So that is not good for anybody. It's a lose-lose situation for everybody, except for the lawyers who are being paid, and for the judge, and for the prosecutor who might get their conviction, or one step closer to their conviction. It doesn't benefit you, and it doesn't benefit the accuser for you to decide to take this fight to court, and you're gonna prove that they're full of shit. It's not that easy. Your goal has to be to get the charges dropped before it ever goes to trial. So rule number 1, which many people will say, is do not talk to the police. When they investigate you and they call you in for an interview, or they arrest you and interrogate you out of the blue, you do not offer them any theories as to why this is happening to you. Because as soon as you do that, they will take that information and they will take it back to the alleged victim and her witnesses or their witnesses, and they will use that information to change everything around and rebuild the case against you to make them look more like an actual victim. Every time you open your mouth when you're talking to the police officer, you're giving them information to help them ruin you in court. So you don't want to do that. Now, there may be the off time where you may be lucky and you might get a cop who actually is a legitimate police officer. If he's not working for a police sex crime unit, he might be more on the up and up. But the cops that are designated in sex crime units, those are the ones who specifically will believe everything the complainant tells them and look at you as you're hiding something. You've done something to deserve this. And whether or not it's the actual claim, they really don't give a shit. They'll find dirt on you to make you look like an unsavory character most likely to have committed this crime. And they will work with the prosecutors to build this. Then your next issue is a defense lawyer. You need a good defense lawyer. Those are hard to find, and I don't come to me to ask me for defense lawyers. I recommend you do your own research. There are plenty of firms out there, but I can't, I don't know which lawyer they would assign to your case. I don't refer lawyers. I don't do any of that. It's up to you to understand how the system works, what you're up against, and you have to be willing to work with your lawyer. You can't just expect them to be the professional and take on the case without your involvement. Keep in mind, If you keep in mind when you're looking for a lawyer that they're going to believe that you're guilty of something, even though they're supposed to defend your innocence, you have to internally know that this lawyer believes you're guilty of something. Okay? So he's going to act accordingly. He's not going to go bend over backwards to defend your innocence. If you pay him $500,000, he might, but you still have to work with him. You still have to direct him where to go, what to do, what you expect. And you need to tell them what you want. And obviously that would be to have the charges dropped. That is your goal. Now, I have worked with many people. I have consulted with people who are in these situations. And I find that a very common thread, and it's very unfortunate, there's no easy answer for this, is that they are very busy working ridiculous hours or 2 jobs or 3 jobs, trying to pay off their legal bills and all of the debt that they've incurred after having, been forced to spend time in jail or getting fired from their job as a result of the arrest and having some downtime and not being able to work, but mainly to pay their defense lawyer. And therefore, because they're so busy working, they're not able to participate in the defense of their own case. And this ends up tragic because they never realize until they're sitting there in the courtroom, they never realize how bad of a lawyer that they had and how much work with the prosecutor the lawyer had been doing, how many deals their defense lawyer had been making, and how many conversations they've been having with the Crown or the prosecutor. And then just calling the client and just giving them a very brief, vague update, but not really telling them what's going on. This is very unfortunate. This is very common. Some people call them dump truck lawyers because they want to take as much money as they can from you and do as little work for your case as possible because, hey, you're not really present in your case, so they can get away with it.